And we are joined by Mike O'Brien, who's running for re-election to City Council position 8. So go ahead with the 2-minute introduction.
Great. So my name is Mike O'Brien. I am finishing up the first term on the City Council. Tell you, having spent 3.5 years on the council, I'll tell you that it's the hardest job I've ever had and definitely the most rewarding job I've ever had. It's a job that I go to every day and learn something new. I feel like it's been an amazing opportunity for personal growth, but I'm also really proud of how much work I've gotten done in my first term. So going back to casting what became the deciding vote that stopped the panhandling ordinance from taking effect, I've done some work in environmental stuff, which is my background, banned plastic bags, and the first in the nation opt-out system for Yellow Pages that eliminated 2/3 of Yellow Pages who lived in Seattle for 2 years. But I'm also really proud of some social justice issues we've worked on. Right here in Ballard, homelessness was not an issue that I spent a lot of time on, but I'm proud to have started the Safe Pilot Parking Program. So people that are living in their vehicles have a safe place to be and can get into a system and back into housing. And while it's a small program with only 7 spots, we've had 41 households come through that in just over a year. 31 of them are into housing right now, which is great. And we're working on expanding that program. We're working on campaign finance reform last year, and also really proud about the city's pledge to be a carbon neutral city by 2050, and we're rolling out the new climate action plan. But I'm also just excited about what's coming next. So I'm a strong advocate for public financing in local elections. Really hope to get something on the ballot this fall. We have more work to do on climate change, working on a local hire initiative to make sure that when the city spends its money, some of those jobs goes to local communities. And affordable housing, starting with the South Lake Union rezone, which passed today, and I'm proud to say that it was my legislation that got almost double the amount of workforce housing provided.
Great. So now we have 5 prepared questions that we're asking all candidates for City Council. 2-minute answers to each of these, and we'll go with Evan, number 1.
What is your strategy for implementing, leveraging, and perhaps improving the incentive zoning program to create diverse neighborhoods and assure affordable housing?
Well, so what we just did at the South Lake Union rezone was make a dramatic shift on how we work the incentive zoning program. So there's 2 sides of it. There's residential buildings and commercial buildings. And on commercial buildings, there's no apartment units in those buildings to provide. So the only way they can pay the incentive, is to actually pay someone to build the housing. We increased that rate, almost 40% over the course of the year. So that'll be more money to fund housing. On the residential side, however, this is where the program has been failing us. The idea behind the program is when you're building a residential unit and accessing this new height, is to simply set aside some of those units to be affordable to people with workforce wages. We did create a loophole, this is before my time, that said if you don't want to do that, you can write a check to the city and someone else can provide it. The problem is that the calculation for how much that check should be was way too low. And no one was opting to provide on-site housing. Instead, they were writing a check to the city, which meant that we were not getting the units produced at the same time. They're often not in the neighborhood. They actually end up costing a lot more because it requires other public resources to provide it. So what we did is when we stepped up this price today from $15.15 per square foot to $21.68 per square foot, we believe that number is high enough that the vast majority of residential developers will now simply say, you know what, it actually makes more sense for us just to set aside some of those units. It's only about 5% of the units in the building, and frankly, it doesn't get us nearly where we need to be. This whole program in South Lake Union is projected to create just over 700 units of affordable housing in the next 18 years. We need about 4,000 units, so we need to figure out how to ramp it up. And so I'll be working with the community to figure out if we get from 5% to 10%, and also finding other funding sources.
Thank you.
In your view, what is the city's role in assuring equal educational and achievement opportunity in Seattle Public Schools?
So, as you all know, the City Council is an independent body from the school board. And historically, the relationship between those two has been, well, what I understand has been fairly distant. But we have had the Families and Education Levy in the city for almost 20 years now. Just 2 years ago, we doubled the size of it, and it was overwhelmingly supported by the citizens of the Seattle. It's a great program. It's a great program because it provides funding, additional funding to the school system that the school system can't ask for. You know, the school board is tapped out on how much money they're allowed to raise in Seattle because of the state constitutional ruling on making sure everyone gets spent money equally, even though we have challenges in Seattle. But what we can do is we can invest that money outside the classroom. That could be in early education, so to make sure that all kids show up ready to learn their kindergarten year. It can be in after-school programs. It can be in summer programs, which is one of those areas where we see the achievement gap represent itself. You know, the studies have shown that kids start in September in different places, but throughout the school year, they track about the same. But then kids from disadvantaged communities or families that don't have the strong background, over the course of the summer, lose a lot of what they learned, while other families stay put or gain. And so they come back September, even greater disparities. And so summer programs help with that. One of the great things that I think we've been able to do with this Families and Ed Levy and the city's Office of Education is to partner with the school district to really create programs that provide the outcomes we want. The city brings a mentality of very kind of performance-based, measured outcomes. You know, we say, what is this program going to do if we invest in these kids? Is it to make sure that more kids are reading at grade level by 3rd grade? Is it so more kids graduate, more kids apply to college? And we can work with the school district and say, if we're not meeting those goals, then let's shut that one down and find a new program that's going to meet our objectives. And it's been really successful.
Great. Question number 3.
Voters passed the Parks and Green Spaces Levy in 2008, yet we've experienced cutbacks in staffing and facilities since then. When the levy is up for renewal next year, how can it be constructed to assure voters that their tax dollars will be allocated wisely?
It's a good question. You know, this last time around, that recession that hit us all really put a lot of strain on the city services and obviously not just the city, elsewhere. And we were in a very tough position because some of the commitments that were made under the Parks Levy, Bridging the Gap Levy, those are the 2 big ones that jump out at me. It was tough to maintain those commitments. I mean, what we had said is, well, the general fund's going to stay whole. We will do all these things we always do. Plus, because we passed the levy, we're going to do more. Well, when the general fund started shrinking, we were in a tough position. And you know, my number 1 priority has been and will continue to be to preserve kind of the human service department and make sure we're meeting the services of the folks most in need. And so things like parks start to get cut. And so when we kept the levy funds dedicated whole, it started to slide down and backfill. And what happened specifically in parks, which is unfortunate, and I think we really need to think through this on the next one, that money, we were so worried about commitment to voters that we said, this money is only, a lot of places, it's only going to be spent on capital improvements, not on operations. Which I get the desire from a voter to say, look, we're not trying to backfill your budget, we want new stuff out of this levy. The problem was that we were in a position where we were starting to shut down community centers because we couldn't afford to keep them running while we're building brand new community centers with levy money, which made no sense. And so, while I understand the desire to really guarantee the voters what we're going to deliver, I think some flexibility is important. And I think one of the ways we get to that is with some of the oversight panels. So the Parks Levy, the Families and Education Levy, the Libraries Levy, they all have their oversight panels. Bridging the Gap Levy, they come in, they're citizen-based, and they say, what are the commitments? We give them some flexibility so when we're cutting programs 20%, they can say, you know what, this money would be better spent diverted there, let's put this off till the next levy. So that's it.
Thank you. David, number 4.
There will likely be 2 types of election reform on the ballot this fall. You've already told us about your passion for public financing, so I'm going to skip that part of the question. But we also have district elections, possibly on the ballot, correct? Do you support district elections and why or not?
So here's my nuanced answer on that one. The concept of district elections, I think, is a really good one, and I support that. And the reason is, right now, 600-some thousand people live in Seattle, 400,000 registered voters. Running citywide, it's really expensive to connect with all those voters. It's part of the reason that it's driven the campaign's council campaigns to be, kind of $250,000 as a starting point to run a successful campaign, which is crazy. I mean, when someone told me I needed to raise $250,000, which I didn't last time, I raised about 140, I was like, $2 million and $700 increments, really? It shouldn't be the first step in local government, be out of the reach of so many people. And so districts change that dynamic a bit. I can't knock on, 400,000 voters' doors, but if we divide the city into smaller chunks, now they start to look like legislative districts. And we know that folks that are well organized and ambitious and energized and have a volunteer base can actually go door to door. They can show up at enough community meetings to actually put their face in front of people in person so they don't have to rely on TV or mail ads. So I think districts are great from that respect. My big concern about districts is that when you start drawing lines in the city, you have to be very intentional about what those lines mean. And the way the districts have been drawn this time, I have some serious reservations about it. I talked to the folks that have been running this program last summer when it was still, in the early phases, and I said, for me to publicly support a program like this, you need to get organizations that have historically worked with communities that are often underrepresented, the communities that, these groups that just did a great job when we drew the 10th district of the congressional districts, find out what it would take to make districts represented. They didn't have that conversation until about 2 weeks before they started gathering signatures, and those organizations largely said, we probably can't support this, and I agree with those concerns.
Elizabeth, number 5.
What are your specific recommendations for selecting our new police chief and restoring public confidence in our police department?
I'll first say that I think Chief John Diaz is, I've gotten to know him a fair amount over the last 4 years, 3.5 years, is a really good person. And I honestly believe he has felt all along the need for reform and a willingness to create reform. What I've seen in the police department, and I want to say that it's the small minority of police officers that represent this, is kind of an old school mentality about what policing looks like, and it's not consistent with what I think most people in Seattle think our city should be. It's not consistent with what my values are around policing. 1,300 officers in that department is a big ship, and it takes a lot to turn around. And I think the leadership that we need at the front of that department is the type of leader that can come in, command the respect of the officers, at least the vast majority of them. We don't have to get everyone on board, but to create that environment and really make it clear that bad behavior will not be tolerated. And that's part of the policies we set and the structures we put in place and the training and all that stuff. But it's also, it's like the school principal or the parent or whatever it is in an organization where someone clearly lets it be known that if you step over this line, the consequences are going to be extremely severe. And if you see someone stepping over that line and you don't say anything, the consequence can be just as bad for you too. We will not tolerate this type of behavior anymore because it's a minority of the people that are doing these things, but they're getting caught on camera, thankfully, so we can all see it. And it's embarrassing and it's wrong. I don't think the Seattle Police Department is, by any stretch, one of the worst police departments in the country. And yet, that speaks to the problem that we have in Seattle is the same problem that's happening everywhere, and it's been going on for decades, and communities of color largely are getting treated unfairly, and we need to fix that. And we have an option to do that.
So now we'll open up to follow-up questions from the executive boards, so Jeff and Clayton and Renee.
Thanks for coming, Mike. This is kind of follow-up on the last question about the police department. First of all, thanks for asking the correct questions regarding the drones, the police department. I think you said, can you think of any people on the city council who would not want to have this ability? So I guess tying in with the police department reforms, is there something we can do in Seattle to kind of erect a firewall against this rampant militarization of our police? And we have a Seattle police spy camera on every block now. They're not turned on, but a lot of people are really afraid of this. And but thanks for the,
Yeah, so
getting rid of the drones. It's a step.
yeah, you know, the mayor gets credit for pushing that one out at the end, but it was clear the council was going in that direction too. The issue around technology and policing, in fact, the issue around technology in general is a huge one. And I think the council did a good first step by simply saying, look, you can't roll out any of these things without being explicit with us what kind of surveillance equipment you're putting in, what kind of data you're capturing, and how that works. In the last 2 months, I've had a chance to meet with a number of citizens who are, oh wow, citizens who are experts on this. And understanding data collection and technology is something that's beyond the scope, frankly, of me or any council member. And I'm actually working towards the creation, hopefully get support of privacy rights community advocacy group that would inform the council with software experts, hardware experts, privacy experts to understand what kind of data we're capturing, how it's being used, make sure it can't be hacked into, those types of things.
Clayton, and then Renee.
You spoke to the economic and geographic dimensions of going to a district system of representation. I wonder if you could talk a little bit about the process ramifications. I mean, would we or would we not have a different political process, a process based upon coalition voting and playing off one geography, one group, one coalition of geographies against another with respect to every issue, and through that sprinkle there.
I think one of the fears we hear a lot about districts is that it becomes very parochial. And there are certain examples in other cities where we see that, and it's about what, delivering projects to my district. We've got Congress is like that a lot. And I think that right now, I believe we're actually very geographically dispersed in the current city council. We fit pretty well within the district. So the disbursement isn't really the problem at the moment. I think we do have this holistic view about what's best for Seattle, and I think that's a good thing. Frankly, I don't believe, at least right away, that going to districts would change that drastically. I think in Seattle, people in different neighborhoods care about other neighborhoods. Yeah, they want their needs taken care of, but they also think broadly, and I think people could like to think broadly. So I think that's not a huge fear, although it could over decades turn into that. I do hear from other jurisdictions when they say, you're elected at large, so who do you represent? And it's what I expect because I've been here my whole life in Seattle, but I do start to understand that I can see how people in certain districts want their one person that they could go to ask their question and be more responsive. And I would support that. And I don't think we would necessarily get to this parochialism, but we would want to be careful of it.
Renee, and then Elizabeth.
I'm also involved with Green Aurora Involved Neighbors, and the Aurora Improvement Project stalled. And there's understanding that it has a lot to do with the Aurora Merchants Association, but do you see anything in your vision that we could kickstart that around housing, public safety, adequate business?
A big problem with that is also around funding. I look at what Shoreline has done when you cross over. Yeah, and it's a world of difference. It's still an automobile-centered district, but it feels so much friendlier than when you get on the Seattle side. And one of the reasons is that the money that we got allocated, we focused, the city focused elsewhere on other projects, good projects and other projects. I think we need to find funding for it. The whole corridor. We're seeing some improvements down here, in the Fremont-Wallingford area because we got rid of those hotels, and it's nice to see some of them being redeveloped. And who knows what will happen there, but I'm pretty sure it won't be the same thing that was there before. But I think we need to provide funding. And yeah, the Aurora Merchants Association has some clout, but I don't see that as being an overwhelming, strong voice at City Hall. I don't know that that's the barrier if we have the funding to do the kind of improvements we want.
Elizabeth?
So I support density, but I'm very concerned about the way density is being implemented in the city. We've got these huge apartment buildings, outdated solas, and right up against the sidewalk, and it's not creating a very livable city. And so I'm concerned about how we can go about establishing that construction includes more trees, more shrubbery that supports wildlife, it could be edible, it could support humans and wildlife, and just make it much more livable and attractive.
Yeah. I'm right in this neighborhood too. I had bike day on 24th in a few months, so I saw another huge project that's coming up right over there. I think one of the things we do in the city that's been striking recently is the green factor in buildings. It allows flexibility for the developer. It doesn't say you have to put so many street trees in, but there's a menu of items they can choose from, whether it's green roofs or street trees or open space or green walls that you can actually grow stuff on. And all those things I think are great. And I frankly think some flexibility there to allow for creativity is a good thing, because then we get kind of a diversity of building types and uses. You know, it's a challenge when we're trying to put a lot of people in the city, which I think is the right thing to be doing. But if we make it a neighborhood that no one wants to live in and force them out, it's not going to work. So we have to provide that. We just passed a new street tree ordinance, the first in 60 years, I think, of the city, that's going to help incent and also protect existing street trees. Small things, but I think they'll help.
So we are about out of time. If you want to take a 30-second opportunity for a closing statement.
Yeah, I feel it's been a real honor to serve the city of Seattle the last 3.5 years, and I'm really proud of the work I did. And I'll just say that I didn't go into this job thinking this is what I want to do the rest of my life, and my number one priority is to make sure that I don't cross any lines. I took this job because, you know, I've been politically active in Seattle for about 10 years now, and I really care about how we do things. And I think there are bold decisions that we can make that maybe not everyone agrees with, but I think they make our city better. And I hope that the council as a whole becomes more and more bold over time to take the actions that we can. Thank you.
Great. Thank you.